one of which is I was the vice president for enrollment management at a university, which meant that I had people reporting to me from admissions, financial aid, student support services, as well as a summer bridge program. I also served as a lecturer at a university here in Maryland, where I taught public policy, and I really enjoyed teaching, and I continue to enjoy teaching. And I also have experience in finance policy as well in higher education. I worked at the state level and working with financial aid from a policy perspective, as well as funding for higher education. I also did my dissertation on financial aid and student success. So that's what really brings me to this area. One of my mottos is, and you'll find that I have many different ones, but this is one for today, and that is that fitting in is much more important than just getting into a college or university. I'm also a member of the Independent Educational Consultants Association. Okay, so you know a little bit about me and where I come from. So let me find out a little bit about you. So I'm going to launch a poll. So if you could take a look at this poll and respond. The first one is, can you tell me about yourself? Are you a student, a parent? We got 50-50 here. Excellent. And then what grade? All right, so a few more seconds. They're still rolling in. All right, if we're done, I will close in the poll and I will share the results with you. So it looks like we got to have a good number of parents here, and as well as most of you, which is to be expected, 12th graders. But we also have 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. That's great too. Good, thank you. Thank you very much for that. All right, I'll stop that. And then as we're getting started, just keep this in mind as we're going through. I think the presentation, my goal is to answer as many questions as I can. And I know many of you have a lot of questions about this whole subject of making the big decision. But as we're going through, keep this one thing in mind. This is a forum for very general questions. So if you have very, very specific questions that you need assistance with, I would be more than happy to help. Through UCEazy, you can get in contact with me through there, and or me or other experts as well. Okay, so let's get started. So the reality is you have the final decision to make for the 12th graders that are out there, right? And you're probably scratching your head and feeling like this young lady here in the picture. But first off, take a step back and think about this. Congratulations, because you're at a point now. I mean, this has been a long journey for you. Some of you all have been on this journey for a number of years, like a year or two, where you've been researching colleges, visiting, you did all your applications, essays, took all your tests. And so now you're at that point where you have multiple choices to contend with. But congratulations. So think about it. I mean, this is a really good point for you to be in. But you probably have a number of questions that we're going to talk about today. One of them might be, how are you going to pay for all this? Yeah, you have these decisions, but what should you look at when you're taking in consideration how you're going to pay for this? That might be one of your questions. Or you might think, you probably receive financial aid award letters, and you might have questions about, exactly what is a subsidized loan or unsubsidized loan or some other terminology that might be on your financial aid award. Or you may have been waitlisted and you're scratching your head saying, oh my goodness, I was waitlisted to my top choice school. What do I do now? Or you might have multiple choices. You might have a lot of choices. Like I said, you've been on this long journey. You're come to this path. You have to decide which path you're going to take. And you have many different choices. So how do you come up with and choose there? Or you might have once again, that question about, did you get enough financial aid? All right. So today, what we're going to do is talk about 5 areas, 5 strategies that I hope you leave away with today. Actually, I give you a little more than 5, but The first one is what to consider if you're waitlisted, some things to think about. Also, how to evaluate college cost, how to look at and compare your financial aid offers that were given to you, what to consider when you're accepting an offer in general, and then really thinking about how to make the most out of the choices that you have. Okay? So those are the things we're going to discuss today. And I tell you, I wish I had a sorting hat, kind of like what Harry Potter, a sorting hat that you can kind of put on your head. Wouldn't it be great to put that on your head and poof, it would tell you what college to go to? Unfortunately, we don't have one. I wish we did. That would be great. We don't have one, but I think some of these strategies will help kind of act as that sorting hat for you. All right? So first, I noticed that we had a good number of parents and students on today, which is great because for me, as an advisor, I always talk about, giving the students the opportunity to take part in all of this because it really is about your life. But the first thing I want you to do is to make sure you set those expectations in terms of determining who's going to make the decision as to which college to attend. And what I mean by that is, parents, you know your teen well enough to know how they think, and students, you know what your challenges are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, etc. But really determining, is it going to be all of the student's decision, both the parent and the student's decision, or just the parent's decision? And using that sort of and that's going to depend on your philosophy as a family, but using that sort of as a method of saying, okay, if it's the teen's decision, then students, it's up to you to do the additional research and do the additional outreach if you need to do that, etc. Or if it's both the parent and the teens, there may be some things that the teen needs to do, students you need to do, or some things that the parents might want to do as well, and you all come together. So I think it's really important to set up those expectations. You don't have a lot of time, of course, you only have less than 2 weeks. But all of this, as I said before, will depend on your philosophy as a family, but setting up those expectations. And students, for you, this decision that you're making, I mean, think about it. This is just one of many, many decisions that you're going to have to make as an adult. And this is like one of the big ones, of course, that you'll have to make. All right? So let's talk about being waitlisted. Okay? My first piece of advice is to make sure you stay calm and move on. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. I know being waitlisted is really, really hard to swallow. It really is. Like I said before, you've been on this long journey for a while, and to have a school waitlist you, it is very, very hard to swallow. But and I know there's a lot of uncertainty about being waitlisted. But remember that I said I was also the Vice President of Enrollment Management, where admissions and financial aid reported to me. Well, I have to tell you the truth. Being waitlisted is really a nice way and a polite way of saying no. It's not that you can't get off the wait list, but for you that are waitlisted, I want you to think about it in terms of, okay, look at your other choices. Being waitlisted does not predict your fate at all. Okay, so now's the time to think of it very rationally. Being waitlisted, that's a tough time because most schools won't even go to their waitlist list until well after May 1st. Okay, so but you have to make a decision before May 1st because you need to put down your deposit. So I'm not saying that you can't get off the wait list, but it's so unpredictable. It's going to vary. It varies from year to year. It varies from college to college. It's just, there are a lot of unpredictable elements. So if you are waitlisted, take a look at the colleges that loved you. Okay, take a look at your other choices and look at them from a rational perspective. If you choose to continue down that and you say, I was waitlisted, but I really think that waitlisted school was a good fit for me, then what you can do is you still have to take a look at your other choices because you're going to have to make a decision by May 1st, right? So you can look at the wait list as long as you're okay with that unpredictability and ambiguity of, kind of waiting around, because like I said, colleges aren't going to go to their wait list until May, maybe June. So you're going to be in limbo. And if you are okay with putting down a deposit at one school and losing that deposit if you get off that wait list, fine. But really, take a look at those other schools that you have and other choices that you have going forward. Okay? Now, let me see. Now, I think this is a good time to see if there are any questions about being waitlisted at this point in time. And there is a Q&A box that you can ask questions in. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't see any popping up right now. So I think the key point here is to love the college that loved you. All right. All right, well, let's move on. Okay, let's talk about the financial aid aspects. And when you're comparing those colleges that loved you, okay? Looking at things from a financial perspective. Well, the first thing to do is when you're comparing the different types of financial aid packages, you want to look at and make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, okay? Meaning comparing grants to grants, scholarships to scholarships, loans to loans, okay? So you want to make sure you do that. Remember, grants and scholarships are things that you don't have to pay back. And so you want to look at your financial aid packages holistically, all right? And compare what you got in gift aid for each different school versus other forms of financial aid as well. When you're looking at your financial aid letters, just really take a look at the different types of loans and be able to be prepared to compare those different types of loans. As you're going through and looking at your financial aid packages, remember that colleges are they're businesses. I like to remind people of that. So if you have to appeal any financial aid awards, like I said, you don't have much time to do it. And you can appeal financial aid awards, especially if you have any financial unusual family circumstances that you may want to look at. Okay, so those are some of the things to look at when you're evaluating financial aid packages. The other thing is to, like I said before, compare the different types of loans and take a look at and compare schools based on the amount of debt that you may end up with. You can make the assumption that over a four-year period, look at the different types of debt and try to figure out, as you're comparing schools, what your debt would look like over a 4-year period. When you're also looking at financial aid packages, if you did get a work-study job, and you'll see that in your financial aid package, some schools package those. Take into consideration that work-study is not a guarantee that you can actually find a job there. It's just, as a student, you're going to have to go out and find the job on campus. I was a work-study student. I worked in the library, but it was really up to me to go and find that position. And, just compare to see what I call self-help work-study, compare what is offered for the schools. And of course, as the one thing that's really, really important is looking at the financial aid requirements for your schools and comparing those. So, for example, a lot of merit-based financial aid awards are going to have things like, you have to maintain a certain GPA or maintain, other criteria to maintain it. So, kind of look at that and compare it in that way as well, right? When you're looking at financial aid awards, make sure, of course, as you're looking at your different decisions that you have to make sure you understand how to finalize your award. Schools have different policies on that. You have to determine whether or not you go online and just click, yes, I accept, or once you decide on what school. And the other thing, too, to keep in mind is that determine if your college, a lot of colleges offer monthly payment plans. So they will allow you to stretch out the payments throughout an academic year, usually over a 10-month period, usually starting in June. So that's something else to consider when you're looking at financial aid awards, to see what type of payment options that a school will have as you're kind of comparing schools. Okay? I see some questions popping up. So let me take a look at these really quick here. This is a good. Someone asked, I'm going to answer this live. If you're waitlisted to a college, are you guaranteed housing there? Well, that's going to depend on your school. It's going to depend, well, if you are waitlisted, the only way you can get guaranteed housing someplace is you have to say that, yes, you're coming. So being waitlisted, I think the safest way to say is you need to check with the policy of that school. I think that's the safest way to say that, because different schools are going to have different policies. Okay. All right, and let me see. There was another one. Okay. We're good. All right. We have another question. Okay, someone asked a question about financial aid. They want to know, what are the chances financial aid to cover cost at UC specifically, regardless of the parent's ability to cover the cost, merit scholarships and assistantships to offset cost? I have to tell you, that is a question that is very specific to your financial aid is given out in a situation that's very specific to people themselves. So I recommend, I'd have to look at your situation specifically. I can't answer that as a direct question. That's a very specific question to your situation. And the same with this, another question is, that's a very specific question as well that you have to answer. Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Hey, Monica, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, so there was a question about how many SIRs can you submit. Did you get that?
No.
Are you?
Yeah, I missed that one. Yeah.
Okay. So if you go to the answer tabs.
Yeah, I see it now. Test. Oh, sorry. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the answer to that. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Oh, here's a good one. What are subsidized and unsubsidized loans? That's a good one. Okay. So when you're looking at your financial aid awards, you will see on there, you'll see something called subsidized loans and then unsubsidized. So subsidized loans are loans that are given based on need-based. What that means is while you're in school, if your loan is subsidized, you will get, the federal government will pay the interest that accrues on that loan while you're in school, okay? Because it's based on need. An unsubsidized loan is a loan where while you're in school, you're going to have to pay back that interest because once again, it's based on need. So it's not subsidized by the federal government while you're in college. So that's just the difference between an unsubsidized and subsidized loan. So I answered that one. Okay. All right, good. So let's move on. So things to look at when you're evaluating college cost, okay? If cost of college is a major factor, and let me back up a little bit and make sure that everyone understands what cost consists of. Some financial aid award letters will have total cost of attendance. Others will leave it as a guessing game. It'll depend on how the school sets it out. So when I talk about cost, I'm not talking about just tuition and fees. Obviously, you're looking at tuition and fees, room and board. You're also looking at, other personal costs, books, travel, those kind of things all lumped into one so that you really get a good total cost of attendance. So the one thing that I recommend is that you compare total cost of attendance across schools when you're evaluating cost, but take into consideration these two aspects. One of them is knowing net price, okay, and net cost. So net price is taking your total cost of attendance, so looking at tuition fee, room and board, transportation, all those total costs. and subtracting out any gift aid. So if you received aid in grants or scholarships, okay, or any merit-based or private scholarships, subtract that out and you'll get your net price. So you can compare schools based just on net price, okay? And you can also look at it from a net cost standpoint. The difference is that net cost takes into consideration all financial aid. So it takes into consideration all, not only your gift aid, but also your self-help, which is work study and loans, all right? I think net price is a little better indicator in terms of what you're going to have to use from your family resources. So just take that in consideration when you're comparing schools. Look at them on the net price level as well as the net cost level. I would tend to look at it from a net price level. Like I said, net cost takes in consideration loans and things that you have to pay back, okay, over time. All right? When you're looking at all of this and you're looking at finances in general, there are some things that you need to be aware of and beware of, all right? One of the things is, and this is going to depend on the school that you go to, and you have to ask, every school's different. Determine whether that college front loads grants. A lot of schools will front load a grant to get you to say yes to them. That means that they will give you grants in year 1, and then they replace them with loans in year 2, 3, 4. So you have to just ask as you're comparing. Like I said, teens, when you're doing your research, this is one of the things you have to figure out. You know, do they front load grants? And ask that question. And then also, you want to be aware of outside scholarship policies. So what schools will do, once again, this is something that you have to ask for the schools that you're comparing. What schools will do is, if you do get a scholarship from outside, sometimes they'll take the scholarships and they'll decrease your loan amounts. Some schools have a policy where they'll just take the scholarships from outside and decrease your grant, your institutional grant amount. So just kind of be aware of that. Then, as I said before, know the difference between net price and net cost and compare those two, the net price and net cost. All right, so you make sure you're comparing apples and apples, and when you're comparing all of these. And then keep in mind as you're going through all of this, and this is why I always tell people to look at this as trying to make a rational decision, and not necessarily that all colleges are rational, but colleges are a business, okay? So look at it from that perspective. So sitting down and really comparing and looking at your own situation and comparing colleges on these areas and keeping that in mind, that colleges are in fact a business. All right? Good. Okay. So another thing to consider is, and this is probably something that's been at the forefront of the parents' mind, and that is return on investments. And thinking about what it is, depending on whatever your goals are, and being able to compare. And I'm going to give you some resources, I think, towards the end, so you can actually do this. Determine your expected earnings post-graduation. So, you know, if you are going to be a teacher, kind of having an idea as to how much you'll earn, or an engineer, or what have you, and being able to compare which college will give you a better return on investments based on your major. So looking at your expected earnings, I think that's a good idea. And like I said, I'm going to give you a website that actually has some of this information in there from schools. So what they do is they find out from students after they graduate how much they're earning 1 year out, 5 year out, etc. So you can get some idea as to the expected return on your investment in higher education. Okay? Now, the other thing that I always recommend that students do and families do is to really look out outcome data, not only return on investment, but other types of outcome data. So here's some things to take a look at. And this becomes important, especially if you end up changing your major. We already talked about cost of attendance. Let me do this for a second. Hold on. Okay, so we already talked about cost of attendance and being able to compare the total cost of attendance for each school. We talked about net cost, okay? Although, You could compare on net price as well. We talked about that. We also talked about looking at your debt. So looking at whatever loans were given to you and being able to project out what your debt may be for that particular school. Keep in mind, this is just an example from a University of Virginia school, okay? The other thing too, when you're looking at your return on investment, you can also kind of project out and get a sense as to what your loan repayment will be per month. And it's just something to think about as well. All right. And like I said, that website that I'm going to give you can help you with these areas. The other piece that I think is really important for you to look at, and hopefully you took this into consideration when you were developing your college list, are graduation rates. And I say that's important because you want to see how many students, what proportion of students graduate in 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years. Okay, in this particular example, it's pretty high, all right? But in a few other situations, you want to look at this. It's an important indicator in terms of how quickly you can graduate and how well the school is in getting you through to graduation, because the longer it takes, the more money it's going to cost you, right? Because you have to pay tuition and fees. If it takes you 5 years, that's an additional year of cost, or 6 years, that's two years of additional cost. So taking this in consideration, and as you're looking at your decision making, looking at these, looking at graduation rates, I think is a good thing to do. The other thing to do as well when you're looking at college data is to look at the requirements for your intended major. So, and also look at what if you change your mind. Sometimes that happens. I'm trying to help you be rational about it. If you go in with one intended major and you end up deciding on another, what happens? How will credits be transferred? Does that mean that you will take an additional year of study or 2 years of study if you decide to change your major? Okay, so that's there. All right, and if all else fails, I always like to have people go to what I call the old school approach. And the old school approach is really easy. What you do is you take out a piece of paper and you wrote pro on one side and con on the other, and you just do a side-by-side comparison. Compare all of the things that I said to you earlier, and make that list and look at it. It's probably a list that you probably made when you were first looking at various colleges to even apply to. So at this stage of the game, when you've come to that place in the road when you're trying to decide, thinking about the same kind of characteristics that made you actually apply to that school, and re-examining, still, do you want, for example, small class sizes, if that was what you were thinking about when you first did your applications, or, looking at and comparing, do you still want to be in a rural location or did you want to be in an urban location? And so just taking that same kind of process that you went through when you were developing your list and sitting down and saying, okay, now I have my choices. Are these criteria still applicable to me? Okay. And just do a side-by-side comparison. And if you come up with, if you say you have 5 schools and 2 of them have more cons than pros, you can kind of, put them aside and focus on the schools that have more pros. So I think that this will help you also narrow down your list as well. Okay, and I mentioned, here are some resources that I mentioned. One area or one resource that's really good, Big Future by the College Board. The College Board, of course, was where you took your SATs. If you took your SATs, they're the same organization that manages and administers the SATs, but they have Big Future. That's a good place to compare financial aid awards. I think they actually have some calculators on there. And then also, I talked about the return on investment here. PayScale actually has a college ROI report that you can take a look at and look at your earnings, your potential earnings, depending on your career goals, and look at return on investment as well. All right. So my final kind of area or strategy, and I talked about this at the beginning a little bit when I was talking about being waitlisted, And that is that you really want to love the college that loved you. Okay. When you make your decision, be committed to that college. Sending your deposit, you can only deposit at one school. All right. And, tell the other schools thanks, but no thanks. And keep this in mind. College is what you make of it. All right. There's no wrong choice. It's really what you're going to make of it in terms of your next 4 years. And really love the college that loved you. Go out and buy the swag once you've decided. Tell people, hey, this is where I'm going, and be committed to being successful at that school. All right. Don't second guess yourself. Just go for it. I think that would be, you've come a long way, and really focusing on that college that loved you is the way to go. So let's review very quickly. So we talked about setting up expectations, right? We talked about staying calm and moving on if you're on a wait list, and loving the college that loved you. All right. We talked about evaluating financial aid packages and comparing college cost, net price, and net cost. We talked about return on investments, looking at your earnings, and I gave you some resources for that, and comparing your earnings from various schools. We talked about looking at outcome data, looking at things like graduation rates, looking at things like, well, what happens if you go to college X and you change your major? Will that increase the amount of time it takes for you to get your degree compared to going to college Y and changing your major? Okay. And then, of course, I went old school on you and had you look at it in terms of making a list of pros and cons. All right. And then here we talk about looking at the colleges that loved you and being really committed to the school that loved you. Okay. I gave you some resources to help. All right. And if all else fails and you need to talk, okay, you need help making that big decision. I mean, we're here to help. We have plenty of help. You can schedule a private consultation with me through union.uceeazy.com or other experts. All right. Okay. And that is it. We're going to open it up for Q&A, and I'm going to give the host to Vinny.
Awesome. Monica, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And before we open this to Q&A, so a couple of things. The first is that I'm going to fire up a poll just to get the audience's feedback in terms of what they thought about the webinar. So let's do that quickly, and then we will go to the actual poll. So the first one is, so this is a feedback. If you can please fill this, it'll give us an idea of how we did and what we should do in future. Okay, so just a few more seconds. Hey, while the poll is being done, Rick Napora, can you hear me? If you can hear me, I upgraded you to a panelist. So for our audience, Rick Napora is another college admissions expert that's available on our site, union.uceeazy.com. So he's on the call, and I don't know whether he, I'm surprised, I actually surprised him with his upgrades, so in case he doesn't see that, but if he does, then Rick, feel free to help with the Q&A. Okay, so so the poll is now closed, and thank you so much for your feedback. So with that, we're going to open up the Q&A. So please fire away, and we do have time for the next 20 minutes or so. Like Dr. Randall said, she will try to answer the general ones, and whichever questions are very specific, that is something that we can do on a one-on-one basis. Dr. Randall, do you want to share the Facebook screen, the last slide?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll go back.
If you can just
Let me
leave
share
that.
Sure. There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
So question and answers or questions. I believe, Dr. Randall, there is an ability for the audience to unmute themselves, right? If they wanted to ask an audience question.
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not really sure if they can do that. Everyone's very quiet today. Everyone went. It's a nice Sunday afternoon.
Dr. Randall, while we are waiting for more questions, from your experience, are there questions that you come across that that you think the audience will benefit from? There is one question.
Oh, yeah. This is a question. Thanks, Harry, for your question. And I think you asked this question before. This is a question I'm going to answer. It's live. Choosing between the different Regent scholarship and computer science and all of that. My personal opinion is that I would rather learn more about your personal situation and help you decide that way instead of just telling you which one. I mean, I think I gave you some criteria, some of the things to look at when you're comparing between the two schools. But to dive deep and to really give you specific advice, I think it would be best to speak one-on-one on that. Oh, here's a question. Should first-year mandatory dorm stay be a criteria for decision-making? Just your advice to students. I know it can vary. Yeah, it can vary. And the reason why I said it can vary not only on the school policy, but it's going to be what's your philosophy? I mean, what is it you want? That's why I think that will vary. And I can't tell you, oh, it should be, without really knowing what it is that you deem to be an important criteria in all the things that you've chosen. Like I said, go back and look at the same criteria that you used when you were developing your college list and see if there's anything that changed since that time of developing the college list, and use that sort of as a baseline for your decisions. All right. No, it's good. All these good questions. Oh, here's another one. There's other question too. And the question is, if you have a student majoring in business, would it be more cost effective to attend a state college rather than a university? Okay. So I'm going to sound like a policy wonk. It depends. Okay. Looking at whether or not a school is cost effective is really going to be dependent upon your own personal financial situation, etc. Okay. And it's also going to be dependent upon what the school policies are, in terms of how much financial aid they give, how much need they meet, etc. So that question, it's really going to be dependent upon a number of different factors. All right. So it depends. And then the other question is, will there be more internship opportunities at privates compared to public universities? Once again, it's one of those things where you're going to have to dive deep and research the schools that you're considering. I don't think there's this blanket, yes, there are more in one than the other, because every school is so different. And when you're, think about it, you've narrowed down to 3 or 4 schools that you have to choose from. Dive deep in terms of asking those questions. If you attend this school and it happens to be private, compare it to their responses in terms of what opportunities will be available at this one school versus the other school. So I think that is the best way of answering that question. I can't give you a blanket policy on in comparing, because it's going to be very different. All right.
Dr. Randall, any other, while people may be thinking of more questions, anything else that comes to mind that you want to, or general questions from your prior presentations, etc.?
Prior presentations.
Or general guidance that you want to provide.
General guidance.
Keep in mind that we have a mixed audience.
Yeah. The one thing that I want to, for those who are in 9th and 10th grade, there are 2 books that I think would be really good for parents and students to read. One of them is, and I always have to look it up because it's kind of a long name here, but I had it on my thing to talk to you all about, is Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, is a good book. It's written by Frank Bruni, who's an author and columnist with the New York Times. And that's a really good book that I think for students to think about. And the other one is How to Be a High School Superstar. Okay. And I can get the author of that book, but that book is about how to be a high school superstar without burning yourself out when it comes to, taking AP courses and IB courses, etc. And it has a really interesting, I think, perspective on it. And I always recommend it to my clients who are in 9th and 10th grade to really read it. Not only the parents, but the students, because I think it'll be good discussion around the dinner table as well. So those 2 things. The question is, can students qualify for in-state at UCs if they work specific number of hours per week during the first year? I think there are probably going to be a little more criteria for qualifying for in-state tuition at UCs. My safe suggestion would be for you to take a look at whatever schools you're looking at and dive deep into doing some research on that. And are there other criteria that make it difficult to qualify for residency? I guess you're talking about in-state residency. Once again, and I hate doing this, but these questions really depend. I mean, I can talk about Maryland, but that's different from wherever you're going. So I think you really need to, I feel like you always have to dive deep and ask those questions from each school or wherever you're going to.
So there was a question regarding how many SIRs can we submit. So Rick Napora, another expert with UCEazy, so he's given an answer. I'll try to publish that. Hang on. Or actually, I'm going to put that in the chat window for everyone. I do. So I'm actually going to read that. The answer is, from Rick's perspective, the ethical answer is 1. But most assuredly, applicants have tried to game the system by sending multiples. If a university shares info with another, even though they say publicly that they don't do so, if they find out that somebody did multiple SIRs, they can have that admission rescinded. Now, the second one, Lakshmi, your question about the residency requirements for UCs. So can you see Lakshmi, I know you can't do audio, but can you see the chat window where Rick Napora has provided the URL for the residency requirements for the UCs? So I'm actually going to put that here as well. Okay, so Lakshmi can see the chat window. Okay. Dr. Randall, did you address the other question that was there from the anonymous?
Oh, do majors and minors offered in schools make a big criteria in making a decision? I think it's going to depend on what you're. I mean, I did talk about looking at it from an academic perspective, and if that's something important to you, absolutely look at it in terms of the criteria and making a decision in terms of what school to go to. I mean, by now you have an idea as to what you want to major in or what you want to minor in, and use that as one of your criteria for determining what school that you want to attend.
Hey, Rick, you're unmuted now. I don't know whether you are on audio, if you wanted to add any perspectives to any of them.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you were on mute. It was my bad.
Okay, so I just had a student that was admitted to California, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and he was admitted to a specific major in the Orphalia School of Business for accounting. And then he was also admitted to Irvine, and Irvine admitted him as undeclared because someone had told him from a friend of a friend that he had a better chance of getting in undeclared, which in UC and Cal State is really a myth because they even have campuses that are, impacted undeclared. So long story short, when we called Irvine to confirm, because I was trying to tell him that he had heard erroneous information, Irvine said that if he switches and tries to get into the College of Business, they only have 10 applicants that they accept through that route. So for him, it was a very easy decision to stick with a bird in the hand at Cal Poly because he wants to be an actuary versus taking the gamble of going to Irvine, even though Irvine was going to give him more money because he may never end up actually being, in the accounting program.
Just to add to Rick's comments, so if you go to uceeazy.com/toolbox, there is a free tool that we have which captures all the majors offered by UCs and Cal State universities. In one single place, drop-down list, you can see which campus offers what. Unfortunately, it's only for UCs and Cal States. Okay, and any more questions? Now we've got two panelists. We've got Rick and Monica. If we just give it a few more seconds, otherwise we should end this meeting then.
And I'll go ahead and post, I actually have the Cal State link, so I'll go ahead and post that to everybody. Let's see if I got that sorted out. And so there you go. Everyone now has access to the one for 2016-27 impacted majors at the Cal State, and you can drill down by specific major. And so again, I also had a student with 4.2 that was denied from SDSU for undeclared, but then one of her friends got in with a 3.7 to another major that she was interested in. So there is a big strategy by actually knowing what you want to study and hopefully, accepting the offer from the school that actually gets you into what you want to study. But of course, if you truly are undeclared, then by all means, going the undeclared route is a strategy as well.
So as far as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors are concerned, we are going to be scheduling a series of webinars starting with end of this month, focusing on different topics, college admission related topics, where we would have panelists like today addressing your questions. So just more of a heads up. And if you chose through the poll to be informed of those webinars, we will be more than happy to share those with you. So we don't see any more questions. So one of those things is like going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Okay. So again, to our attendees today, both parents and students and our panelists, thank you so much for taking the time on a Sunday afternoon. And to seniors, good luck to you and your family for the college decision and for the 4 years in college thereafter. Thanks again.
Thank you.